You mentioned the events of the last 3 months and watching, everything happen from, the lockdown to the Black Lives Matter protests. And, George, you're in a unique perspective because, you're kind of a stranger in a strange land. You're there, and you're in DC. You've been there for what, a year or so, and you get to watch this wild and weirdness happening in front of you in a culture that's not your own. And yet you bring, still a lot of Anglo values and a lot of great education that you had about politics, economics, religion. And then, of course, your better half is Candace Owens, who's on the front line of this fight. What's it been like for you to watch this? And what is your perspective and read? Because I think you have a unique perspective, more so than almost anybody in the world.
Yeah, it has been a really, really interesting 3 months. It's been a really interesting year for me. And I think for both of us, and to some extent, there's so many different answers I could give to this. I'll try and condense it into something which is manageable. But the last 3 months has been unlike any 3 months I've ever experienced throughout my life doing anything. And in terms of political activism, in terms of just the kind of mass response to something which was clearly so heartfelt as a nation. Now, the real game changer was I would say was Candace's video. Obviously that video which she launched on Facebook in response to the death of George Floyd was one of the most, the response that we got from that was just incredible. And I sort of deal with more of the business side of her organizations, and even my side of the organization felt the kind of like mass outpouring of relief that a lot of people said, we needed to hear something else. And what was staggering was the fact that it comes back to that media conversation. What was staggering was the fact that no media organization was willing to put that forward. And it actually took a 31-year-old woman in her spare room to reach effectively 150 million people to present the other side of the argument. That for me was staggering, because I just think, obviously I'm married to her, so it's like, she's my wife. Why is it that my wife, out of every woman on the earth, or why is it that the two of us doing what we do, are at the forefront of that charge? It's just incredible that the media now has become such, has totally bought into this left-wing narrative, and therefore will not present anything else. And that is staggering in and of itself. The other staggering sort of thing for me, I don't want to overuse that word, but the other amazing thing for me, if you like, was the fact that, watching the debate unfold on both sides of the channel, or both sides of the Atlantic, sorry, not the channel. But, you've got this debate in America, which quickly became exactly what we all thought it would become: a mob culture, shakedown and sort of overthrow of the establishment. And that's interesting for me, because I've seen it happen in Britain before, where you've seen like the London riots, and you've seen, what probably was justified anger at the beginning against something which they, perceived to be an injustice, quickly evolve into overthrow the monarchy, overthrow, everything to do with Britain, overthrow Churchill, tear down Cecil Rhodes, all this kind of stuff. And actually in the US, it just took on this whole life of itself. And really what was interesting was how far it went this time. And I'm a big believer in the slippery slope. I was saying things 10 years ago, which have now only just become true, but I was still saying them 10 years ago. And I was saying this to Candace. It's like, you look at debates we were having 10 years ago, and I said, if we do this, this is where the debate will end up. And friends of mine at the time were saying, don't be ridiculous. We're never going to get to that stage. And, you look at, for example, I'll give you one example. The transgender argument is a very, very easy one, right? The transgenderism argument, I was saying 10 years ago, this will become the narrative within 10 years. We will have men trying to change their sex to become women, and then you will have them using bathrooms. And I had friends of mine, I can recall conversations I had with colleagues as well as personal friends who were saying, why does this bother you so much? It shouldn't bother you so much. It's simply what one person does doesn't affect, why does it bother you? And I said, because you will then be allowing, biological men into women's bathrooms. That bothers me. If you have a daughter, do you want them sharing? And that was just something which I was saying 10 years ago, and now it's become very apparent. Going back to the kind of last 3 months, again, it's exactly the same conversation. Racism has become the hallmark of sort of Western liberal democratic debate. It's become a yardstick through which everything is now measured. And that is an absurdity, because, of course, we now live in a less racist society than we've ever lived in before. And you'll always get pockets of racism. That's because we're all humans, and you'll always get pockets within society which advocate on behalf of or against certain ethnic groups. That's just how it works. That's how humanity works, because there is inherent prejudice within humanity. But the fact of the matter is that, and this is something which Candace will obviously say far more eloquently than I can, if you look at America 100 years ago and you look at America today, if you seriously think you're living in a more racist society, you need your head examined. And it's the same with Britain. And so it worries me how much we're seeing the corporate establishment buy into it. It worries me how much we see the political establishment buying into it, which is both a UK and an American thing. And it worries me that these kind of absurd debates, which are presented by the left as, the new narrative, the new normal, as they like to say, for political discussion in both America, kind of quickly morph into political discussions in Britain. Why on earth are we having a debate about Black Lives Matter in the UK? It's just not the same issue. Trying to draw parallels between, police brutality in America and, police brutality in the UK is just an absurd discussion. It makes no sense. And so as a result, that's kind of been one area where it's just been fascinating for me to watch the way in which the American political establishment and corporate establishment has quickly bought into that narrative. And of course, the reason they're doing that is because it's an election year. And this being my first US election, I've really been involved in to more so than any other year I've ever been involved in, has just been absolutely fascinating, because at the beginning of the year, and this is something I say quite often to supporters of ours, if you look at the beginning of the year, pretty much every polling company, I can't think of one off the top of my head, even the left-wing polling companies, the NAACP, their internal polls, were publishing polls which showed that Black support for Trump was north of 30%. You even had one, I think it was a Harris poll, which reported Black male approval for Trump up 42%. The Democrats obviously saw that at the beginning of the year and hit the panic button. So, again, what they did was they took an event in the US, which was a tragedy, and that point has been made very often. And then they turned it into a political football, and then they, made a whole football match out of it. And then it became, how many goals can we try and score with this football match? Of course, what eventually the Democrats will do, and what they've already started to do over here, is score own goals, because they've pushed the debate so far that this defund the police, this whole absurdity around, we have to, pull down statues of every Civil War hero, doesn't matter which side. You saw a Frederick Douglass statue taken down in America the other day. I mean, this kind of commentary is now becoming absurd. It's becoming so absurd that the silent majority look at that and say, do I really want my history, my nation's history rewritten? No, I don't. So that's been fascinating for me to watch as well. And that I think will have a huge place to play in the November elections over here. So it's been a fascinating 3 months. I mean, my life has just changed so dramatically within the last year and a half. I never would have expected anything like this. And so as a result, it's been great. And it's been a real roller coaster, and it kind of gets more exciting. Of course there's its bad days, there are good days. But it's a very, very different world to be in over here.